I killed 11 plants in my north-facing bed before I figured out what actually works there. 11. If your shade garden feels like a graveyard of good intentions, stick around, because the problem was never your yard, it was the plants you kept buying. Once I stopped guessing and started using perennials that are actually built for shade, that same bed went from a dead zone to the best-looking corner of my yard. We're going through 10 flowering, shade-loving must-haves that'll do the same for you. Subscribe now so you don't miss where we're headed. Number 1 on our list is Hosta. If you've spent any time at all researching shade gardening, you already know this name. It's often called the Queen of the Shade Garden, and once you see a mature clump in person, you understand why. Hosta is grown primarily for its foliage, bold, broad leaves in an almost overwhelming range of colors, from deep forest green to powdery blue to golden chartreuse, some splashed with cream variegation. Some varieties produce leaves the size of dinner plates for a dramatic architectural look. Others stay small and tidy for edging a path or tucking into a container. It's hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9, which covers most of North America, and it wants partial to full shade with rich, moist, well-draining soil. Give it that and it barely asks for anything else. Once established, it forms long-lived clumps you can divide every few years, so one plant slowly becomes 5 or 6 for free. In midsummer, many varieties send up tall flower spikes with fragrant, bell-shaped blooms that hummingbirds visit regularly, and it pairs beautifully with finer textured plants like ferns. If you've got a spot under a tree that's been bare for years, this is very likely the plant that finally ends that streak. Tell me in the comments, what's the one plant you've killed more than once? I promise you're not alone, and there's a good chance by the end of this list, you'll know exactly why it kept dying on you. More often than not, it's not the yard's fault. It's the wrong plant in the wrong spot, which is precisely why every plant on this list earned its place. Number 2 is Astilbe. This is the plant for anyone who thinks shade gardens have to sacrifice color and drama. It's grown for stunning feathery flower plumes that rise above the foliage in early to midsummer, ranging from soft blush pink to pure white to deep magenta to vivid red, depending on the variety. Sitting above finely divided, almost fern-like foliage that adds softness even before a single bloom appears. It's hardy in zones 4 through 8, wants partial to full shade, and needs consistently moist soil. This one genuinely does not like drying out, which makes it the perfect fix for those low, soggy corners of the yard that pool water after rain and frustrate everyone who's tried to plant anything there. Planted in groups beneath trees, along shaded fences, or along moist garden edges, and you'll get sweeping waves of feathery color that catch the breeze in a way few other perennials can match. Before we move on, a quick word. If you're the kind of person who gets genuinely excited watching a dead corner of the yard turn into the best part of it, that's exactly why this channel exists, and exactly why you should be subscribed. We put lists like this out regularly, and if you're not following yet, you'll miss the next one. It costs nothing and takes 2 seconds. Go tap it now before you forget. At number 3, we have Bleeding Heart. It's a springtime favorite known for graceful arching stems draped in heart-shaped blooms in soft pink or pure white, the kind of plant that genuinely looks pulled from a fairy tale and stops visitors mid-step to ask what it is. It thrives in partial to full shade and does best in cool, moist, well-drained soil, hardy in zones 3 through 9. It emerges early in spring, blooms through late spring into early summer, and then, worth knowing ahead of time so it doesn't catch you off guard, the foliage often goes dormant in midsummer, especially in hotter climates. That's not the plant dying, it's simply resting until next spring. Experienced gardeners pair it with plants that fill in later in the season, like hosta or ferns, so there's never a bare gap left behind. Despite its delicate look, Bleeding Heart is surprisingly hardy and long-lived once established, and it's often overlooked by gardeners chasing bigger, bolder plants, which is a shame because it's one of the toughest, most reliable perennials on this entire list. Isn't it strange how the things that look the most fragile so often turn out to be the most resilient once you actually give them a chance? Let me know in the comments if a plant has ever surprised you like that. Before we go further, let's talk about the 3 mistakes that trip up almost every gardener attempting a shade bed for the first time, because avoiding these will save you more time, money, and heartbreak than anything else in this video. The first mistake is treating shade as one category. It isn't. There's dappled shade, where light filters through branches for a few hours. Partial shade, with 2 to 4 hours of direct sun, usually morning, and full shade, with little to no direct sun at all. Hosta, Astilbe, and bleeding heart are all flexible within that range. But matching the plant to your specific type of shade is what separates a bed that merely survives from one that flourishes. Spend a few days actually watching your yard, where the light falls at 9 a.m., noon, and 4 p.m., and that 15 minutes will teach you more than any plant tag. The second mistake is assuming shade-loving automatically means drought-tolerant. Usually it's the opposite. Soil under mature trees is often bone-dry because tree roots are aggressively competing for the same moisture your new perennials need. Budget for supplemental watering the first year or two, and a couple inches of mulch will help the soil hold on to what moisture it gets. The third mistake is planting into a bed that hasn't been amended. Shaded soil under trees tends to be compacted and low in organic matter, starved of the sunlight that normally feeds a healthy soil ecosystem. Working a few inches of compost into the top layer before you plant gives these perennials the rich soil they actually want, and it dramatically shortens how long it takes them to establish rather than just hang on. None of these 3 fixes cost much. A bag of compost, a bit of patience, an afternoon spent actually watching your yard, but skipping all 3 is why so many shade doesn't work for me stories start with a perfectly good plant in the wrong conditions, not a plant that was ever really doomed. Keep those 3 lessons in mind, because every plant left on this list will benefit from them. And if you're the kind of gardener who wants practical, no-fluff tips before spending money on something that might not survive your yard, that's exactly what this channel is built around. So if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time, because there's a lot more of this coming and we don't want you to miss it. One more design note before we keep moving. Hosta, Astilbe, and bleeding heart all respond extremely well to being planted in odd-numbered clusters, 3s or 5s, rather than scattered as single specimens. A cluster reads as intentional and lush. Single plants dotted around a bed read as sparse, no matter how healthy each one is. If your budget only allows a handful of plants this season, buying 3 of one variety and grouping them will get you a far more impressive result than 6 different plants scattered thin. And on deer, all 3 of these are deer-resistant to varying degrees, with one exception, Hosta. Deer find it genuinely appetizing, so if you're in a high-pressure deer area, consider a repellent spray or lean more heavily on Astilbe and bleeding heart instead. Number 4 is Brunnera, often called false forget-me-not. In early spring, it produces clusters of tiny sky-blue flowers that look like something out of a European forest floor. But the real strength here isn't the flowers, it's what happens after they fade. Brunnera's heart-shaped leaves, especially in silver-leafed cultivars like Jack Frost, practically glow in shady corners and add brightness for months after the blooms are gone. It's hardy in zones 3 through 8, prefers partial to full shade in moist, well-drained soil, and forms tidy, slowly spreading mounds that make an excellent low-maintenance ground cover once established. It's also remarkably cold-hardy, often one of the first perennials to emerge in spring, pushing up through soil most of the garden still considers too early. Planted along shaded walkways or beneath trees, where its shimmering foliage brightens even the darkest corners on a cloudy day. Number 5 is Coral Bells, Heuchera, a plant you've almost certainly seen without knowing its name, thanks to ruffled, almost metallic foliage in colors that sound made up until you see them in person: caramel, plum, lime, near black. It's grown mostly for that foliage, which holds color from spring through frost, though in early summer it sends up thin, wiry stems topped with tiny bell-shaped flowers hummingbirds treat like a buffet. It's hardy in zones 4 through 9, prefers partial shade and well-drained soil, and genuinely doesn't want to be babied. Overwatering kills it faster than neglect ever will. Once established, a clump slowly widens into a mound you can divide every 3 or 4 years, so one plant becomes several for free. Tuck it along a shaded border as a color anchor between larger leafy plants, and it holds that spot looking sharp for the entire season. We've covered 5 plants, 5 to go, and I need to be honest with you about something. Remember those 11 plants I killed at the start of this video? The next one on this list is the plant that finally turned that streak around, and it's not one you'll see on most lists like this. But first, what's the one plant you've tried and failed to grow in a shady spot more than once? Drop it in the comments. There's a decent chance the second half of this list has your fix. Here it is, the plant that finally worked in my worst spot. Number 6 is toad lily, Tricertis. Most shade perennials finish blooming by June, but toad lily waits until September or October to put on its show. Small, orchid-like flowers speckled purple and white along arching stems, right when the rest of the garden is winding down. It's hardy in zones 4 through 9, wants partial to full shade, and prefers soil that stays consistently moist. This one sulks in dry soil, so plan on supplemental watering the first year or two if your bed dries out fast under a mature tree. It spreads slowly by rhizome once it settles in, gradually forming a modest colony rather than staying a single stiff clump, which gives it a looser, more natural woodland look than a lot of the tidier plants on this list. Plant it somewhere you'll actually walk past in fall, because those blooms show up during the one stretch of the year most shade gardens have nothing going on, and that's exactly the gap it fills. If a plant like this, something most people have genuinely never heard of, just gave you an idea for that spot you'd written off, that's exactly why we make these videos. There are so many great plants that never get attention because they're not flashy enough for a garden center end cap, and it's honestly frustrating watching gardeners struggle year after year with the same 5 overused plants when solutions like this exist. If you want more of the plants nobody talks about but everybody should be growing, subscribing is the only way to guarantee you see them, because we don't always show up in your feed otherwise. Number 7 is Solomon's Seal. If you appreciate elegant architectural form, this is a plant you'll fall for immediately. Gracefully arching stems lined with pairs of small, dangling bell-shaped flowers in spring, paired with slightly blue-toned foliage that turns a rich buttery yellow come fall. It's hardy in zones 3 through 8, thrives in partial to full shade, and appreciates moist, humus-rich soil. It spreads slowly by rhizome underground, gradually forming elegant colonies over time that look best when simply left to grow and spread naturally without heavy interference. It's also highly deer-resistant, which matters if you garden anywhere near woodland or rural areas, and once established, it tolerates dry shade impressively well. There's a calm, almost meditative quality to it, the way the stems arch, the way the flowers hang in neat, orderly rows, the quiet rhythm of it. Plant it beneath mature trees in dappled light or along a pathway where it provides height and a graceful backdrop for lower-growing plants layered in front of it. Now that we're 7 plants deep, let's talk about something that ties Brunnera, coral bells, toad lily, and Solomon's Seal together, because understanding this one concept will change how you plant the rest of your shade bed. It's called layering, and it's the single biggest difference between a shade garden that looks like scattered plants and one that looks intentional and finished. Think of your bed in 3 tiers. At the top, height and structure. Plants like Solomon's Seal, giving the eye somewhere to travel upward. In the middle, workhorse foliage, Brunnera and coral bells, anchoring the bed with color and shape. At the bottom, ground-hugging fillers that knit everything together and keep weeds from finding bare soil. Plant with all 3 tiers in mind from the start, and the bed looks full and finished far faster, with noticeably less weeding once the lower layer closes in. It doesn't have to be complicated either. Even a small bed with 1 plant from each tier reads as far more intentional than 5 plants crammed together at the same height. So be honest, when you look at your current shade beds, are you actually layering or just planting whatever caught your eye at the garden center? No judgment. Almost every gardener, including experienced ones, has done exactly that. Tell us in the comments which tier your yard is missing most, because for a lot of people it's the bottom layer, and that's usually the fastest, cheapest fix of the 3. There's also a practical money-saving side to this. Brunnera, toad lily, and Solomon's Seal all spread over time. Brunnera by gentle clumping, toad lily by rhizome, Solomon's Seal by rhizome as well, each at its own unhurried pace. A single plant of each, given 2 or 3 seasons, can multiply into a drift large enough to fill a meaningful section of a bed on its own. That means you don't need 15 plants to fill a space, 3 or 4, some patience, and the garden does the rest of the work for you at no additional cost, which matters a lot if you're building out a whole bed on a tight budget rather than all at once. Number 8 is Japanese Painted Fern. If you think ferns are just green background filler, this one will change your mind. Fronds in a metallic blend of silver, burgundy, and soft green that shift depending on the light, holding color and shape through the whole season instead of fading into plain green. It's hardy in zones 4 through 9, prefers partial to full shade, and wants soil that's moist but well drained. It doesn't like standing water any more than it likes drying out completely. It spreads slowly by rhizome into a soft, expanding clump, making it an excellent underplanting beneath taller perennials. It actually prefers a touch more filtered light than deep shade to keep that metallic coloring vivid. Tuck it into full darkness and the color fades toward plain green, which surprises people who assume fern automatically means the darkest corner you've got. Use it as the textural bridge between bold foliage plants and bare ground. It's the plant that makes a bed look finished rather than just planted. Number 9 is Epimedium, sometimes called barrenwort. Don't let the odd name put you off, because this is one of the true hidden gems of the shade garden, and most gardeners have genuinely never heard of it. In early spring, it produces delicate, almost orchid-like flowers in yellow, pink, or white that seem too fragile for how tough this plant actually is. And after they fade, the heart-shaped foliage stays attractive all season, often taking on bronze tones by fall. It's hardy in zones 5 through 9, thrives in partial to full shade, and unlike most of what we've covered, it actually tolerates dry shade impressively well, which makes it one of the few real answers for that brutally difficult spot beneath a mature tree where nothing else will hold moisture no matter what you do. It's also slow to spread and completely non-aggressive, so if you've been burned before by a ground cover that turned into a takeover, this is the opposite. You'll likely be dividing it to make more, not fighting to keep it contained. And number 10, Lady's Mantle. This is the plant that taught me the difference between a shade bed that photographs well in June and one that actually looks good all year. Its scalloped chartreuse green leaves collect dew and rain in perfect little beads that catch light in a way that genuinely stops people mid-walk. And in early summer, it throws up airy sprays of tiny yellow-green flowers that read almost like a soft mist over the foliage. It's hardy in zones 3 through 8. Tolerates partial to full shade, and prefers moist, well-drained soil, though it's more forgiving of dry spells than you'd expect once established. It self-seeds fairly generously, so if you don't want it spreading, deadhead the flowers before they set seed. Otherwise, let it wander, because a naturalized drift of Lady's Mantle along a shaded edge is one of the easiest expensive-looking effects you can get from a plant that costs almost nothing. Use it as a soft edging plant along a shaded path. It's the kind of plant that makes everything around it look more finished just by being there. That's the full list. 10 plants that don't just tolerate shade, they were built for it. If one of these just solved a spot in your yard you'd already given up on, the way Toad Lily solved mine after 11 failed attempts, then this video did exactly what it set out to do.